Welcome to the Cinematic Trail, an AI-generated deep dive conversation into the ever-evolving world of cinematography. From exposure theory to lens choices, from lighting philosophy to creative workflows, we explore the craft, the gear, and the stories behind the frame, one trail marker at a time. Want to take your cinematography to the next level? Explore our online courses and learn more at cNomadic.com. And be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for weekly insights and inspiration. Let's begin the journey.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Let's dive right in. Imagine you're standing outside, right? Bright, sunny day.
Yeah.
The sun is just blasting light everywhere. And if you were making a film, you'd probably think, great, plenty of light.
Seems logical.
But then you see the film crew setting up, and they're bringing out more lights, or maybe these big white or silver boards to bounce light around. It feels, I don't know, totally counterintuitive.
Right. Why add more light when there's already so much sun?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of fascinating question kicking off our deep dive today. We're exploring how light is controlled in visual media, specifically cinematography.
Mm-hmm.
And our guide for this is a really insightful YouTube video by Chris Tannard.
Yeah, it's a good one. And our mission really is to get why adding light isn't always just about, making the image brighter overall.
Right.
It's more fundamental. It's about gaining creative control. It's really about managing the relationship between the bright bits and the dark bits in your frame.
Okay, so less about more light and more about the right light in the right places, shaping it.
Precisely. Adding it strategically. And we're going to dig into the core ideas behind why this matters. Concepts like light levels, separation, and how you measure that using something called ratios.
Okay, so first things first, levels. When filmmakers talk about light levels, what exactly do they mean?
Levels are pretty straightforward, actually. It's just the overall brightness of everything, or maybe specific parts within the frame.
Gotcha. Overall brightness.
Yeah. And managing these levels does a couple of really crucial things. The most obvious one is just getting proper exposure.
Making sure the camera can actually see it properly.
Exactly. Making sure the sensor can capture the image without the highlights being totally blown out white or the shadows turning into this grainy, noisy mess. You really have to understand your specific camera's limits, its dynamic range.
So you might hear someone on set say, like, we need more level over there, just meaning make that bit brighter.
Yep, that's common. But just as importantly, maybe even more importantly for creative control, managing levels is what enables you to achieve separation.
Ah, separation. Great. Now this sounds like where it gets really interesting. What is separation in this context?
Separation is all about making sure you can clearly tell the difference between the different brightness zones in your picture. Your highlights, the brightest parts, your midtones, the middle grays, often where faces sit, and your shadows, the dark areas.
So defining those areas, making them distinct.
Exactly. Defining them so they don't all just sort of mush together into one flat-looking image.
And what happens if you don't get that separation? What's the actual problem?
Well, if everything kind of blends together, the image just looks flat, like you said.
Right.
And Chris's video makes this point really well. If you don't have separation, it becomes incredibly hard to control the image later.
Later, you mean in post-production?
Yeah, exactly. When you're trying to do color grading or make specific adjustments to, say, just the shadows or just the faces, if they aren't separated properly on set, adjusting one affects the other too much.
I see. So even out in bright sunlight, you're not just trying to make everything bright. You're intentionally working to create these distinct zones, shadow, midtone, highlight that stand apart.
That's the goal. And this distinction, the separation, is often talked about and measured using ratios.
Ratios, like you mentioned at the start.
So you might hear a DP, a cinematographer, talking to their gaffer, that's the head lighting technician, and say something like, let's aim for a 4:1 ratio between the key light on the face and the fill side.
Okay.
That's basically code for how much brighter one area should be compared to another.
And Chris mentions in the video that a 4:1 ratio, say between highlights and midtones, is the same as 2 stops of separation. What are stops?
Right. So a stop is a standard unit in photography and cinematography for measuring differences in light exposure. One stop difference means doubling or halving the amount of light.
Doubling or halving. Yeah, good.
So 2 stops means 4 times the light difference, because it's 2 times 2. 3 stops would be 8 times the difference, 2 times 2 times 2, and so on. Ratios are just another way to talk about those stop differences. A 2:1 ratio is 1 stop, 4:1 is 2 stops, 8:1 is 3 stops.
Ah,
We don't need to go super deep into the physics of stops right now, but understanding that they represent these distinct steps in brightness difference is key. Ratios are just a common way to communicate that difference.
got it. Okay, so quick recap. Levels are overall brightness. Separation is defining the different light zones. And ratios or stops are how you measure or quantify that separation.
You got it.
Now, the video really stresses that you absolutely have to measure this stuff on set. You can't just, eyeball it.
Oh, absolutely not. And the reason is simple. Our eyes are amazing, but they're also incredibly adaptive.
They adjust. Right.
They adjust constantly. What looks like a clear difference to your eye standing there might look totally flat once it's captured by the camera sensor and displayed on a monitor. Your eyes trick you into thinking there's more separation than there actually is.
So if you can't trust your eyes, what tools do you use? The video mentions a few options.
Yeah, you need objective measurements. So you'd use tools like a dedicated light meter, an incident or spot meter, or very commonly these days, you use tools built into monitors or cameras, things like false color display.
False color.
Yeah, it's a mode where the monitor shows different brightness levels as different colors. Like maybe deep shadows are purple, midtones are green or gray, and highlights are yellow or red. It gives you an instant visual map of the brightness values.
Okay, that sounds useful.
It is. Or you might use a waveform monitor, which shows brightness on a graph. Or even simpler, zebras, those stripy patterns that appear over parts of the image that hit a certain brightness level.
Right, I've seen those.
These tools give you the actual numbers, the objective data about the light levels in different parts of the frame.
And interestingly, Chris specifically says that a histogram, which you see on a lot of cameras, isn't really the right tool for this particular job. Why not?
That's a great point he makes. A histogram shows you a distribution of brightness across the entire image. It's good for seeing if you're clipping your absolute highlights or crushing your deepest blacks overall.
Okay.
But it doesn't tell you about the relationship between different specific areas. You need to know what's the brightness level on her face compared to the shadow on the wall behind her. A histogram just averages everything together.
Ah, I see. It's too general. You need to compare specific parts.
Exactly. Tools like false color or a waveform let you do that analyze specific regions of the frame and see their values.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, let's get practical. The video uses this great example with students sitting outside.
Yeah, this really helps make it concrete. It's a simple setup. A group of students just sitting outside on some steps, talking.
And first, they show the before shot. This was just a test run, right? No extra lights, no bounce boards, nothing.
Correct. The only thing they controlled was the camera settings, aperture, ISO, shutter, mainly just to stop the brightest bits like the sky or maybe some white shirts from getting completely blown out.
And when they looked at that shot using the false color tool,
What they saw was very little separation between the midtones, like the students' faces, and the shadow areas right near them. Most of that key area, the faces, was kind of clustered down in the 30 to 40 IRE range on the false color scale.
okay, IRE. Remind me what that is again.
Ah, right. IRE is just a standard unit for measuring video signal levels, basically brightness. Think of it roughly like a percentage, maybe 0 is pure black, 100 is pure white just before it clips. So 30-40 IRE is pretty low down. It's in the upper shadows or lower midtones. Not ideal for faces, generally.
Got it. So the faces and the darker areas nearby were all sort of cramped together in that low brightness zone.
Pretty much, yeah. Now, there was good separation between the really bright stuff, like the sky, and the really dark stuff, like maybe some deep green bushes way in the background. Those were clearly distinct. But that crucial relationship between the main subject, the faces, and their immediate surroundings, the nearby shadows, lacked definition. And the consequence, as Chris explains, comes later.
In post again.
Yeah. If you try to brighten just the faces in post-production, you'll inevitably lift those shadow areas right along with them because they started so close together in brightness. You just don't have independent control.
You can't finesse it. You lose that ability to sculpt the light and shadow. Okay, so that was the problem. Lack of separation. How did they fix it in the aftershot? What did they actually do?
This is where adding light comes in, even in the sun. They brought in a silver bounce board, just a simple reflector, really, and positioned it off camera.
To catch the sunlight.
Exactly, to catch the existing sunlight and redirect it, bounce it back onto the students, filling in some of those shadows.
And he mentions they specifically aimed it at just 3 of the girls. Sounds like they were limited by their gear.
Yeah, he points out they only had one bounce board, maybe a 4x4-foot one, so they had to be strategic. It's a great example of dealing with real-world limitations on set.
Right.
And he also notes that another group of students in the shot actually didn't need as much help because the sun was already hitting some concrete steps in front of them and bouncing up naturally, providing a bit of fill light already.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Natural bounce.
Yeah.
So they used their one artificial bounce where it was needed most. And visually, what was the difference? The students just looked brighter.
They definitely looked brighter, yes. But the crucial difference, the thing they were aiming for, was clear when they looked at the false colors again.
Separation.
Separation. Now, you could clearly see a distinction. Those deeper shadow areas, like maybe some green columns or the bushes he mentioned, they stayed down in that 30-40 IRE range. But the students' faces, lit by the bounce board, were now pushed up significantly into the 50s or even 60s IRE range.
Ah, okay. So the bounce created a clear gap, a brightness difference between the shadows and the faces, the midtones.
That's exactly it. They lifted the midtones away from the shadows, and that separation is what gives them control later.
How so?
Because now, in post, they can make adjustments to those shadow areas, maybe darken them slightly for more mood, or adjust their color without drastically affecting the brightness or color of the faces.
Or vice versa.
Or vice versa. They could tweak the brightness or contrast of the faces without lifting all those shadow details along with them. They've separated those tonal ranges.
That's a massive difference in flexibility.
Yeah.
It's not just about making faces brighter, it's about making faces distinct from the shadows so you can treat them independently.
Precisely. It unlocks that ability to shape the final look, to guide the viewer's eye. That just wasn't possible with the before shot.
Of course, it's probably not always easy to get perfect separation. The video touches on limitations too, right?
Oh, absolutely. The real world always intrudes. While the ideal might be to achieve certain specific ratios, what you can actually do on location is always constrained by the gear you have, the time you have, the weather, the environment itself.
Like that example Chris gives about high ratios.
Yeah, he mentions that trying to get a really strong ratio, like maybe an 8-to-1 ratio, which is 3 stops of difference, out in broad daylight is incredibly difficult.
Why is that?
Because you're fighting the sun. To make one area 8 times brighter than another area also lit by the sun, you either need an extremely powerful light source to overpower the sun, or you need massive flags or nets, what they call negative fill, to block the sun and create really deep shadows.
Which isn't always practical.
Not always feasible, especially on smaller shoots or run-and-gun situations. So you have to be realistic. You work within your means.
But the core takeaway, the minimum goal, even if you can't hit a perfect 8-to-1 ratio or whatever, is always to make sure you have some usable separation.
Exactly. Check your levels with those tools, false color, waveform, meter, and make sure there's some distinction between your important tonal ranges. That's the fundamental first step towards taking control of your image, instead of just letting the ambient light, like the sun, dictate everything for you.
So wrapping this up then, our deep dive into this nomadic video really shows that controlling light, even when it seems like there's plenty, isn't just about cranking up the brightness.
Not at all.
It's fundamentally about creating separation. Deliberately defining those distinct areas of highlight, midtone, and shadow.
So you get that control.
Right, so you gain the power and the flexibility to actually shape the image, to refine it, especially when you get into post-production.
And understanding this, it helps you appreciate the visuals you see in films or good videos. You start to see the intentionality behind the lighting. It's rarely accidental.
Yeah, you realize it's crafted.
It's crafted.
Yeah.
It's the result of carefully managed light designed to create separation. And of course, if you're making your own videos or photos, this gives you a massive insight into how to get more control over that final look and feel.
Definitely. We started with that idea that seemed counterintuitive, adding light to bright sunlight, but it's not really counterintuitive at all.
No, it's essential.
It's a crucial step for gaining creative control by creating separation.
Which does make you wonder, doesn't it?
What's that?
Well, what other things do we see or interact with every day that seem really simple or straightforward on the surface, but actually have these hidden layers of really complex, intentional control, maybe even manipulation happening just underneath, things we don't even notice?
That's a really interesting thought. Something to chew on.
Definitely something to think about.
Until next time we dive deep. That's a wrap for this episode. Thanks for the great conversation.
Yeah, really great insights today. Thanks for tuning in and spending some time with us.
Thank you for joining us on the Cinematography Trail. We hope today's journey sparked new ideas and sharpened your eye behind the lens. Until next time, stay curious, stay creative, and as always, happy filming.